All right, everybody, welcome back for another deep dive. You know how we do it around here. We
Absolutely.
dig into some thought-provoking stuff, and today is no exception, let me tell you. We're tackling a statement that really made me stop and think. It says, acting morally for weak reasons is cowardice.
Hmm.
And, I had to unpack this one.
Right.
We got an excerpt here that really digs deep, and honestly, it's challenged some of my assumptions about why we do good things.
Yeah, it's easy to kind of pat ourselves on the back for doing the quote-unquote right thing.
Exactly.
But this excerpt forces us to examine the motivations behind those actions.
It does, and it gets right to the point.
Oh, yeah.
It calls them out. It talks about weak reasons for moral actions, and it breaks them down into some categories that are uncomfortably familiar, I think, for a lot of us.
Well, let's hear them then.
Okay, so the first one it talks about is fear of consequences, right?
Right.
Like, are we only being polite to our boss because we're terrified of getting fired?
Oh, yeah, classic example.
Or how about, like, donating to charity just for those likes on social media?
Ah, yes, the good old virtue signaling.
Exactly.
But what's interesting here is that both of those examples, they lack a key ingredient of genuine morality.
What's that?
Personal conviction. It's like we're going through the motions without truly believing in what we're doing.
So then is it even moral at that point?
Well, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, if we're just acting out of fear or for some kind of social reward, where's the integrity in that?
Right. It's like we're outsourcing our moral compass or something.
Exactly. We're
Yeah.
letting external factors dictate our actions instead of digging deep and figuring out what we truly value.
And that's where the whole cowardice thing comes in, right?
I think so.
It feels cowardly to avoid that inner work.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because it's tough, to confront those difficult questions and figure out where you stand on things.
It's much easier to just go along with the crowd or do what we think will keep us safe.
Right. It's the path of least resistance, but it doesn't necessarily lead to genuine moral growth.
Okay, so fear and approval seeking, those are two big, weak reasons that the excerpt calls out.
Mm-hmm.
But there's another one that I think is even trickier to spot.
Okay, I'm intrigued.
It's this idea of blind conformity as a weak reason for moral action.
Blind conformity.
Yeah, like what exactly does that mean?
Well, think of it this way. It's essentially going along with the crowd, doing what everyone else is doing, without stopping to ask ourselves if it aligns with our own values.
So like if everyone's suddenly into, whatever the latest good thing is,
Right.
and you just jump on the bandwagon without really understanding why.
Exactly. You're not really thinking critically about the issue. You're just kind of swept up in the current.
And that doesn't sound very courageous, does it?
No, not really. Because true moral courage involves making choices based on your own convictions, not on what's popular or trendy.
But what if someone starts doing something for the wrong reasons? Like social pressure, let's say. But then they genuinely start to care about the cause.
That's a really interesting point, and it speaks to how our motivations can change over time.
Right, like you might be doing something just to fit in at 1st,
Mm-hmm.
but then you actually learn more about the issue and you start to feel a real connection to it.
Exactly. And then the motivation shifts from external validation to a genuine desire to make a difference.
So the key is to be aware of that shift, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
to pay attention to why we're continuing the behavior. Is it because it truly matters to us, or are we still stuck in that pattern of just conforming?
So it's not just about the action itself, but the why behind it.
Precisely. The why is what gives our actions moral weight.
And this excerpt is really emphasizing that true morality takes guts.
Absolutely.
It even calls it a form of courage.
Mm-hmm.
So what makes moral action courageous in this sense?
Well, imagine having to stand alone, disagreeing with a popular opinion, even when, you might face backlash.
Oof, yeah, that's tough.
Or think about times when doing the right thing might cost you something, your comfort, your reputation, maybe even your job.
Right, those are high stakes.
They are. And that's where true moral courage shines through, when we're willing to stand up for what we believe in, even when it's difficult.
That makes me think of those stories of whistleblowers.
Yes,
The people who risk everything to expose wrongdoing.
exactly. They're not doing it for applause or recognition. They're doing it because they believe it's the right thing to do, even if it's dangerous.
It's like their integrity is driving them.
Absolutely. And that's what this excerpt is getting at, aligning our actions with what we deeply believe, regardless of the personal cost.
It's about building that strong internal compass so you're not swayed by every external pressure or trend that comes along.
Right.
Okay, so we've talked about the weak reasons for moral actions, and we've explored this idea of moral courage.
Mm-hmm.
But how does all of this connect back to that initial statement that acting morally for weak reasons is cowardice?
Well, let's think about it this way. If our moral actions are primarily driven by avoiding punishment, seeking approval, or blindly conforming,
Okay.
then we're essentially avoiding true self-reflection and the responsibility that comes with it.
We're taking the easy way out.
Exactly. It's easier to just go with the flow, even if deep down something feels off.
So it's like we're choosing comfort over the hard work of figuring out what we truly stand for.
Precisely. And the problem with that is that our actions become inconsistent and unreliable.
How so?
Well, if you're only doing good things because you're scared of the consequences, what happens when those consequences disappear?
Ooh, that's a good point.
Right. You're left without a solid foundation for your moral choices.
It's like building a moral house on sand, you know?
I like that analogy.
It might look good from the outside, but it can't withstand any real storms.
Exactly. And that's where that idea of cowardice really comes into play. It's about avoiding the challenge of developing a strong moral core.
It's like we're letting fear and insecurity dictate our choices, instead of stepping up and doing the hard work of becoming the kind of people we want to be.
Right. And ultimately, that lack of authenticity can undermine our own sense of integrity and purpose.
So what's the takeaway here? What can we do to cultivate genuine moral strength?
I think it starts with self-awareness, being honest with ourselves about why we do the things we do.
So asking ourselves those tough questions.
Exactly. Are we acting from a place of true conviction, or are we letting fear, social pressure, or the desire for validation call the shots?
That's a question we should all be asking ourselves regularly, I think.
Absolutely. And it's not a one-time thing. It's an ongoing process of self-reflection and growth.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive. It feels like we've only just scratched the surface of this idea.
It's a rich topic, for sure.
But hopefully you've got some new food for thought.
Yes.
Maybe even a little motivation to examine your own whys behind those seemingly good deeds.
Because sometimes the most courageous act is to look inward and confront our own motivations.
So much to ponder. Thanks for joining us on this one, folks.
Absolutely.
Until next time, keep thinking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. We'll see you soon.